to West End. And David Silito was there for News 24's entertainment programme 030.
Leicester Square, press, autograph hunters, Klingons. Another Star Trek movie, this one's number 9, and it's called Insurrection. Captain Picard, who's now replaced Captain Kirk, faces a dilemma. Does he intervene in another planet's problems?
How many people does it take before it becomes wrong?
As always, Star Trek fans see parallels with the real world's politics. In this case, of course, Bosnia and Kosovo.
Indeed, there are some political overtones to the film, which are reflected in some of the circumstances that we find in Bosnia today, yes.
Patrick Stewart with his new fiancée, and in the film, he finally finds a new love interest and a fountain of youth.
Don't let go of this moment.
Older men suddenly finding a renewed interest in the opposite sex, perhaps then rather a parable of Viagra.
Yes, right. No, this was all conceived before any of us heard about Viagra.
It really has a sound moral.
And the moral?
Vanity is evil.
Ah, vanity. Perhaps a message lost on some of these fans. Irrespective of plot or quality, hardcore Trekkies will turn out, immune to sniggers and criticism about their obsessive behaviour, and here they're rather nice Klingon costumes.
Some definitely question sanity.
Some call us sad.
Yes, some call us anoraks.
Definitely feeling aggressive tendencies, sir.
Others, however, prefer to hide their Trekkie tendencies.
I'm a bit of a Trekkie, but I wouldn't admit it publicly.
But you have, really, by appearing here.
Oh, my God, you're right. Please, burn this tape, don't let anyone see it.
Back in the 60s, the stars told stories reflecting the civil rights demands of racial tolerance. In the 80s, they were saving whales. Now it's the cult of youth and military intervention. But perhaps more startling now is just the scale of the phenomenon itself.
Well, what began as a 5-year mission to boldly go where no man had gone before has now gone on for nearly 35 years. There have been 4 TV series and now 9 films, and the fans won't let them stop. David Silito, BBC News, Central London.
I bet he loves them. Now then, here's a quick look at this morning's papers. And the face of one man on the front of most of them, Graham Kelly, FA chief, quits over £3 million scandal, says The Sun. The shame, that's a word that is used by a lot of newspapers. Similarly, he's pictured on the front of a Daily Mail in a £3.2 million cash per vote row. And the back page of the Express, disgraced. No uncertain terms what the Express makes of all of this. Graham Kelly out, and Wiseman, of course, holding on, as the little caption says there. And it's not just the tabloids that are fascinated by that story. There's Kelly again on the front of the Independent. Chief of FA quits over cash scandal. News at the top there of the change in pension arrangements announced by the government yesterday. And no prizes for guessing. Here he is again on the front of the Guardian. FA boss quits after scandal, that word coming out again. And talking of scandals, there we go on the left, a serious story. Tide turns, I didn't mean it really, tide turns against Clinton. Bill Clinton, of course, just arrived back in Washington after his trip to the Middle East, but of course facing that impeachment vote on Thursday. Just in case you'd forgotten about that word, impeachment. It's 4 minutes to, which means it's time to take a look at the weather. Here's Sarah Wilmshurst.
Thanks a lot. Well, it's a bit murky in some southern parts of the country. Some dense fog patches here and there, visibility less than 200 metres in 1 or 2 spots, so driving conditions out and about could be fairly difficult to start with. But as we go through the morning, most of that mist and fog is going to lift away, but it's still going to be quite a lot of cloud around throughout the day in many southern and eastern parts, just a little bit of brightness or hazy sunshine about. Now, we have got a weather front in northern parts that has been bringing some wet weather into the north through the night. And as we go through the next 24 hours, the low pressure system responsible for those weather fronts is going to push its way steadily eastwards, and the weather front is going to sink its way south. That's a cold front, and that's going to move south later on tonight and through tomorrow. We are going to see strong winds coming along through today, these big arrows, but at least they're orange arrows. That means it's mild weather coming in from the southwest. So we are going to have yet another mild day, but here's the wet weather we've had over the last few hours. Steaming in across Scotland. It's now tending to ease away. It's going to continue to ease its way away as we go through the day. So things will brighten up in many parts of Scotland. Still, though, a good deal of cloud around, but it is going to be mild. Temperatures 10 degrees, perhaps as high as 12 in some parts towards the Moray Firth. So this morning across the rest of the country, and that mist and fog down in the south, as I said before, clearing away, and elsewhere dry and bright. A little bit of wintry sunshine coming through from time to time, and that wintry sunshine will continue on and off throughout the afternoon. Most of it in eastern parts, quite cloudy at times in more western areas, and then late in the day we are going to see more in the way of cloud thickening up in southwestern parts, and that could bring a little mist and drizzle towards evening time. Here are today's temperatures. Another mild day, temperatures 10, 9, 11 degrees, but there is going to be that brisk wind, and that wind is going to take the edge off those temperatures through the afternoon. So off to the races, Bangor, Catterick and Wolverhampton. It should be fine. Quite a lot of cloud around though, a little bit of brightness here and there, but a mild day, temperatures around about 10 degrees. Heading into tonight, it is going to be quite murky in many western parts, some drizzly bits of rain here and there, and then late on in the night we're going to see thicker cloud coming into northwestern parts, bringing more in the way of persistent rain into northwestern parts of Scotland and perhaps Northern Ireland later on. It is going to be a mild night, perhaps a chilly evening over in eastern parts, temperatures 3 to 5, but those temperatures will rise through the night, and further west temperatures will fall no lower than 8 or 9 degrees, and that's the way the weather looks.
Let's go! If you like your Christmas with all the trimmings, BBC1 is serving up some delicious treats just for you. It's done. Big helpings of fun.
La la la. Friendship.
Merry Christmas. There's going to be something to appetize every palate and tickle everyone's fancy.
Super.
So, look no further this festive season.
I'm going to be giving someone the Grand Canyon.
How do I look?
Looks like fun.
It's going to be one BBC of a Christmas here on One.
Good morning and welcome to Wednesday here on BBC One, which starts now with breakfast news and the business breakfast with Sophie Raworth and Paul Burden.
Good morning and welcome to the BBC's Breakfast News. The headlines this morning: turmoil at the headquarters of English football after the dramatic resignation of the sports chief executive. There are calls for big changes to the way the game is run to rescue England's hopes of staging the World Cup in 2006. A renewed threat of military action in the Gulf as the UN says Iraq is still blocking its weapons inspectors.
Touchdown for Endeavour. One flawless mission completed.
And back to Earth for Endeavour after the first giant step towards an international space station. And now here's Paul Burden with today's business headlines.
Thank you, Sophie. Good morning. The big business stories today, and the other big football story: Newcastle United confirms it is in takeover talks, but keeps the city guessing by refusing to name the suitor. And the Public Finances Watchdog says the then Conservative government lost the taxpayer £1.5 billion by mishandling the sale of Railtrack. And quick look at the markets overnight. The Nikkei in Japan picking up pace somewhat, ahead 77 points, about at 14,088.
There are calls this morning for a shake-up in the way football is run in England. It follows the surprise resignation of the English Football Association's chief executive, Graham Kelly. He stepped down last night over an unauthorised grant to the Welsh FA. The speculation that it may have been linked to attempts to influence the decision about who should host the World Cup in 2006.
For most Brentford fans leaving Griffin Park last night, their side's exit from the FA Cup was of far greater significance than the ructions at Lancaster Gate earlier in the day. But most agreed the scandal wouldn't reflect well on England's bid to stage the World Cup in 2006.
Absolutely, it doesn't look good. Of course it doesn't look good. That's why he's resigned. That's why he's resigned. So there's got to be some sort of inquiry into that sort of thing, hasn't there? To find out exactly who did what and why.
You know, if people around the world see that that's how we conduct our business, they're not going to be very impressed, are they?
It will take quite some strong decisions and some strong personalities to sort of recover the confidence of English football and attempt to have a greater influence, particularly with regard to the World Cup bid.
As FA Chief Executive for 10 years, Graham Kelly was highly respected in world football. Though not the most charismatic figure the English game has produced, his integrity, diligence and genuine love of the sport was much admired. He left insisting he'd done nothing wrong and that England's World Cup bid would be unaffected. There's no reason why this should cause any damage, he said. The bid is not the FA's bid, it's for England. It's backed by the government, the Premier League and the Sports Council, and there's an awful lot riding on it. Temporarily, David Davis, the man charged with breaking yesterday's stunning news, will assume most of Graham Kelly's duties. The most pressing of them will be to find a successor, and Mr. Davis, a former BBC journalist, could well be a candidate. Others in the frame, for now at least, would be Rick Parry, the pioneering former Premier League chief executive, now with Liverpool. Greg Dyke, the TV executive, who's well versed in media rights negotiations and also a Manchester United director. And Gordon Taylor, the players' union boss, who many thought might get the job last time round. But until the internal wrangling at Lancaster Gate over Mr. Wiseman's position is resolved, little can be done. The longer this sorry business drags on, the more damage it will do. Kevin Geary, BBC News.
Iraq is once again facing the prospect of military airstrikes by Britain and America. The United Nations Chief Weapons Inspector, Richard Butler, has presented a highly critical report to the UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan. It details a series of Iraqi obstructions over the past few weeks. Well, our correspondent Rob Watson is in New York and has seen the report. Rob, what exactly is in the report?
Well, it's about 10 pages. It's pretty blunt stuff from Mr. Richard Butler, which is only what you'd expect. The Australian head of the weapons inspectors is known for being pretty direct. Essentially, he says, look, we have been testing President Saddam Hussein's promise of goodwill. We haven't really had any new information. We haven't had any, really, of the new documents that we have asked for. We've been allowed into some sites, but it's been pretty clear that they've been tipped off about this, so all the evidence had been cleared out. So all in all, the conclusion, simple, blunt, Saddam Hussein has not provided the cooperation he promised.
So what happens next? Can they carry out airstrikes without any more warnings?
Well, that is certainly something that the United States and Britain have warned they would do. If you remember back to the last crisis, which ended in the middle of November, after President Saddam Hussein backed down, President Bill Clinton and the Prime Minister Tony Blair said, look, if there's anything short of full cooperation in the future, we reserve the right to take military action without any further warning and without necessarily any dithering about at the UN with the diplomacy here. So I think to some extent US and British credibility is on the line here.
But do we know when this decision might be taken?
No, we don't. A spokesman for the US State Department said that President Clinton would be meeting with his foreign policy advisors shortly, that he was aware of the report. I think we're looking at days, really, certainly not much longer than that.
Rob Watson, thank you for joining us. President Clinton's chances of escaping impeachment, meanwhile, over the Monica Lewinsky affair are said to be collapsing. He seems to be losing support from Republican politicians. The president was relying on their votes to block his impeachment, but as he returned from the Middle East peace mission, it emerged that some had withdrawn their support.
Bill Clinton returned last night to a capital deep in constitutional crisis. Whilst he was away, the political tide turned against him. One by one, the moderate Republicans in Congress, whom the White House had been counting on for support, have been coming out in favor of impeachment.
I will vote for the 4 articles of impeachment. It remains for the United States Senate, through a trial, to either acquit or convict the president.
500,000 emails and thousands of phone calls are flooding into Congress every day, but they are mainly from pressure groups. Outside Washington, most of Americans just want the whole crisis to disappear. Even in this Republican part of New Jersey, they don't seem to think the punishment fits the crime.
I just think it'll mess our country up something awful if he's impeached.
Everything is going pretty well as far as the economy, and I don't think anybody wants to shake that up.
When you have a family to raise, I can't be bothered just